Good afternoon, everybody. It's Doug Ross, Pacific Wholesale Mortgage, coming at you from my master bedroom once again. It is warm outside. It's starting to warm up. I got a short sleeve shirt on. I'm excited about the impending summer. And today, what I wanted to talk a little bit about was the process from start to finish when dealing with a client, from the initial phone call all the way to, hey, we funded your loan. I'd love a review. So this is kind of a one-stop shop video to track milestones, get organized, and understand my systems. Now, everybody's going to have their own nuance to the systems they implement, but I want to make sure that you guys understand mine and can glean anything that might help you operate your business more efficiently than maybe you are currently. So my philosophy is that, and I'm going to have notes here so you guys can, write down or whatever. My pillar of success comes from staying organized, always having a plan, and getting creative, coming up with reasons to reach out to people and maybe changing things and modifying things to make it applicable to this situation is what I'm about, right? Everything I do is designed to create a specific outcome. And the more you get into scripting and saying certain things a certain way with the right kind of energy, that's how you sell. That's how you remain efficient, and that's how you stay a top producer. So if what I'm sharing here today is going to save you some time, awesome. I'd invite you to implement some of these systems, but I'd also invite you to bring your own little flavor into things, right? Everyone's going to operate things a little different. I'm an engineer, so I'm very structured and systems driven. So first thing I want to talk about when we're talking about efficiency and keeping a good business plan is email signatures. I've created a separate video outlining my email signatures. They're on the PWM cloud. Please download them into whatever email platform you're using, but have your 20 email signatures. You are going to say the same thing 100 times in 2 or 3 months to different people, because what we do for a living is a bit of a hamster wheel. It's meet someone, get them pre-approved, get them into contract, take them through all the milestones that are the same for everybody, and then fund it, and then meet someone, do it again, right? So the first time around, it's going to be like wide eyes. Oh my gosh, this is my first time. I'm scared. But your 50th time going through it, you're going to start to anticipate the different milestones and things. So the better I can prepare you, the more of a veteran you're going to seem to your borrowers, even if this is your first time going around. So that's the goal behind what I'm sharing today. So email signature blocks are really, really important. So take a look at that video. It's a separate video. I didn't want to get into it on this one. So we start with the initial client call. So you get a call. The majority of my business comes from my business partners, right? So usually the leads I get are coming from a particular person, right? So let's say I got a great realtor down south, the Los Banos area. His name's Jose Servin. So let's say Jose Servin sends me an Spanish-speaking lead or an English-speaking lead. Okay, so my intro call, and my goal is to call a lead within 10 minutes of when I get it. So realtors really appreciate being quick when they send you a lead, because sometimes they just got off the phone with them. These people are shopping around. They're thinking about going to Wells Fargo to get pre-approved, and I'm going to try and call them first and sell them on why they should use me over Wells Fargo or some other guy. Okay, so the initial phone call, a couple things to keep in mind, right? I always want to make sure that I'm trying to stay positive, right? Have that positive energy. Nobody wants to talk to a downer, especially on a sales call. Okay, be curious, show curiosity, ask questions about them, show that you want to understand their situation and try and figure out a solution that's going to meet their problems. And then number 3, be professional. Okay, make sure that that you do have a level of professional with these. Now, I'm really close with folks. I'm pretty buddy. I'm pretty laid back in the way that I talk to people to kind of create that added layer of comfort. But I do try and maintain a certain level of professionalism for sure. Okay, so right away when I call him, I say, hey, can I talk to Manuel, let's say? And he's like, oh, this is Manuel. I'm like, hey, great, Manuel. Hey, my name's Doug Ross with Elite Mortgage. Got your contact information from fill in the blank, realtor name, who mentioned you might be interested in getting pre-approved for a home loan. Is this correct? And they'll say, yeah. I talked to Jose this morning. Yeah. And I'm like, awesome. Well, hey, I'd love to understand a little more about your situation. Is this your first time ever getting pre-approved? What's the story? So that's when they say, oh, no, well, it's my second time buying a house, or actually I'm looking to refi or whatever. So that's a really important question is this your first time ever getting pre-approved or buying a house? So actually I'm going to separate that and say, is this your first time ever buying a house? And then my second question is this your first time ever getting pre-approved? Just so I understand how familiar you are with the terminology and the things I'll be going over. Okay, that's how you get to learn whether or not they're shopping you, right? Oh, no, I've talked to 4 lenders already. You're my number 5. Okay, then I already know, okay, now I know what I got to do here. Okay, so is this your first time ever buying a house? First time ever getting pre-approved? And my third powerful question is, what kind of time frame are we looking at here? Do you already have a house in mind, or are you just kind of getting started? Like, where do you envision your time frame being here in terms of getting a house? Okay, that's going to help me understand their sense of urgency. Some dude who's just thinking about buying a house and it's just kind of a thought and over the next couple of months maybe is very different than someone who's like, yeah, I found a house, I want to get pre-approved right now, I want to make an offer. Okay, so understanding their timeline is very important because you can adjust what order of importance they get after you get off the phone. Okay, so first time buying a house, first time getting pre-approved, what kind of a time frame are we looking at? After I ask those questions, I always say, hey, you know what? Since this is your first time, or since this is our first time talking, I would love to take a few minutes and just chat a little bit about myself and a little bit about this whole process, if that's okay. Okay. Always state the purpose of your call. Now, in this particular phone call, I wait till I ask a few questions to start to kind of state my purpose. But on any other phone call, right away, I introduce myself and I say, hey, man, just calling to give you a Tuesday update. Just calling to give you a quick Thursday market update on what rates are doing. Just calling because I saw this ad, made me think about you. Rates are going up. I just want to kind of get you informed as to what's happening out there, right? But if I don't state my purpose, you're not going to have a reason to pick up and talk to me. I hate the phone calls that just drag on with sales guys. Dude comes and sits in my office, some new AE. Hey, man, how's it going? How's business? Yeah, that's cool. Well, and they just start, and it's like I'm looking at my watch, like, gosh, how much longer are you going to need here? Right? I'm busy. I got stuff to do. So make sure that you define the purpose of your call. Ask permission. Make sure that they have a few minutes to talk to you about this, right? Because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, you know what? Now's not really a good time. Kind of in a rush, about to head in the store. And then your follow up question is always, great. Well, when are you done? I'd love to schedule a time to maybe talk a little more about this whole process and help bring you up to speed on what you may qualify for. Okay, so ask, make sure that they have time. That's very, very important. Okay, so you ask permission, and so after they say, yeah, I'd love to. So I give my little spiel about, hey, I'd love to just take a few minutes and talk a bit about myself and my company and this whole crazy pre-approval process. Do you have a few minutes? Is that okay? And usually they say, yeah, man, go ahead. Right. So the next thing I say is, okay, well, once again, my name's Doug Ross. Right. I work for Pacific Wholesale Mortgage, and we are a wholesale broker. Have you ever heard of that term before, mortgage broker? And a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, but I don't know what it is, right? Explain it to me, right? So I ask that question. 90% of people don't understand. So, okay, well, the only difference between me on the broker side versus a direct lender is that I'm not brand specific. I work with 50, 70 different banks. I have a lot of options when it comes to banks. So I have a lot more flexibility when it comes to finding the right program for you. And because there's so many banks competing for the business on my side, our rates and fees are on a wholesale level. Okay, now in terms of the process itself, right, or my role, I should say, my job is to get you pre-approved and ultimately get you the loan. And I'm going to be the main point of contact for you from start to finish. Now, in talking about the pre-approval process, step one would be to have you fill out an application. Right, the application gives me the basic information I need to establish credit scores, work history, debt to income ratios. Everything a lender cares about is going to be in that application. And then from there, we would schedule an appointment to either have you come in the office or we could do it over the phone. But during that appointment is when we would do a deep dive into all the different products and programs that you would be eligible to receive. Now, during that phone call or that appointment, I'd also be reviewing actual documents from you, right? These are the same documents that an underwriter is going to look at, but I want to look at them first to make sure we're not going to have any problems. Towards the end of the appointment, of course, we'll go over interest rates, total out of pocket you're going to need, monthly payments, and make sure we find a program that you're comfortable with. From there, after that appointment, you get a pre-approval letter from me, and with that letter, you can start to effectively shop for homes with your agent. And once you get an offer accepted, our closing team gets involved to take that contract to get it closed as quickly as possible. So that's the process from start to finish. And step one is that application. A couple different ways to do that, and then I dive into we could do it over the phone. If you're not super busy, always try and get the application over the phone. You got a quick 10 minutes, I'll just ask you a couple questions. We'll get that application busted out right now. But when you start to get busy or you start to do bigger volume, like someone in my shoes or other big producers, I ain't got time to be on the phone every time for 15 minutes asking questions and listening to answers and this and that. So at this point in my career, I do push for the online application. So I'll say we could do it on the phone, or I could send you an online application. You can fill it out online at your convenience, maybe tonight when you get home and have a few minutes with your spouse if you're going to be going out together. and more often than not, they'll do the online side of things. Okay, so you're explaining the two different ways to do an application. You're defining who you are, right? When I first started, I just had a conversation, got buddy with someone, but when we got off the phone, they had no idea who I was, what I did, what company I was with, what I was in terms of a broker, my role, or anything. So I always want to make sure people understand who I am and what I do. And you can go over that little spiel I just ran, dude. It's like 3 minutes, but it leaves them something to munch on while they're thinking about doing that application. You got to give them a reason to go with you in the very first phone call, or they won't. Yeah, Doug's a nice guy, but I really don't know much about him, right? No one's ever going to say that about you if you do that intro and you talk a little bit about your company, you talk a little bit about why you're different, and you take the time to educate them on the process. That alone is going to put you in front of the line to everybody else they're talking to. It really will. Aside from your personality, aside from helping them get the warm and fuzzies and talking with you, you got to give them information. Okay. So they do the application. Now, once I get that lead, they go right into my CRM. So I send them that email with the link to the application, and I have a follow-up system that I'll go over here in a minute that reminds me if they haven't gotten back to me the next day to follow up with a phone call or a text message. Whenever I send them the initial email, this is very important, I send them a text. And my text, just like my email signatures, I got text signatures, guys. I just type in HY and I get this big line that auto-populates. Hey, this is Doug over at Pacific Wholesale Mortgage. Just sent you an email, wanted to confirm you got it okay. Please confirm when you get a chance. Boom, that entire text, all I got to type, actually that text is CONF, confirm. As soon as I type CONF, boom, auto-populates this big old text, and then I send it, right? So now they got the email. I send them a text message to confirm. They'll usually text back, and that's impressive to people. When you're sending them an email, you're texting to confirm. It shows that you care. What I never want to have happen is I send them an email, 2 days go by, I don't follow up, I finally call them, my realtor calls them or calls me, and they're like, dude, Doug, what happened? Right? Whenever a realtor has to call you for an update, you're not doing your job. Okay, you should always be giving them updates before they even think to ask. Oh, Doug, let us know what's happening. My CRM, whenever I touch a lead, I click a box that informs the realtor of my little interaction I just had, so they're always in the know. Make sure you have that feature. Our CRMs have it, but there's like an extra step you got to take to make sure that the realtor, the business partner who referred you, are getting these updates. Okay, so you send the email, you do the text follow-up, and then you put them in your CRM. And your CRM is going to start sending them, monthly emails of like pre-approval tips and tricks and credit score tips and tricks and just a way to stay in front of them. And my CRM also has follow-ups, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. It's the text message. It's the video intro. It's the this. It's the that. So every day I'm getting in front of these people. Okay, that's what you got to have. That's what you got to be. Be first, be last, fill up the middle when it comes to follow-up. Okay, so make sure you put them in your CRM is the main point behind this slide. Now, when it comes to my email and how I've structured my business, before getting into being a loan officer, I was a project manager for the Army Corps of Engineers. I was over the dredging projects. And as a project manager, I had to stay super organized. I had to make sure that I was abiding by timelines. We were getting the right contractors in there. We only had certain windows to do certain testing of the water and the dredging. And so as such, I became very familiar with Outlook. Outlook was the way that I organized my business, made sure that I was sending emails and tracking and not forgetting anything. Nothing was slipping through the cracks. As a loan officer, you are also a project manager. You are a project manager over the loan. So a good loan officer is a great manager, and everybody feels informed and educated as to what's happening, okay? That's what we're trying to achieve here. So I'm going to go over how I organize my Outlook. I believe there'll be other videos. I think Lucas was going to put out a video on how to do the same thing using Google or Gmail or something, okay? A lot of email platforms have these features. But I've organized my email, and this is I pulled this up from a presentation I put on like my first year in lending, right? I was trying to teach realtors how I was staying organized and whatnot. So this is a sample screen of my email. Right. And you got here's the emails that are in my inbox. I always clear my inbox every single night. So I keep an email here until I've addressed it. And when I feel I've addressed it, I click on it, I move it into the folder that it belongs to. Okay. This is the box that shows the actual message itself. And on the right-hand side here are all my tasks. This is how I drive my business right here in my tasks. Every morning When I get up and I set up my day, I go through my tasks and figure out what I got to get done. Okay. So on the left-hand side here, I've highlighted, I've created folders, and these folders mimic my Dropbox folders. So I've got in process, I've got pre-approved, I've got pre-qual. You keep going down, it's got all those same folders. And I got borrowers by their last name. And so I put the email traffic that corresponds to that file, I store it away in the applicable folders when it's done, when I don't need to do anything else. And so every night before, or every day before I go home, I make sure that my inbox is cleared and there's nothing outstanding. Okay. Over here, my tasks I mentioned, very, very important. Okay. So you can type in new tasks, you can send emails, and they'll pop back up in your tasks if you tell them to, as a reminder to follow up. Now, how to do this, how to create tasks on Outlook, is you go to View, right? You go to Do bar, where you got a little arrow there. This is kind of nice. And then underneath that, so you show the to-do bar, basically. When you do that, your to-do bar is going to show up here. Okay. Now you can type new tasks at the top here. If I just want to be reminded of something I just got off the phone, I want to type a task to be reminded of. But also you can create tasks via email, which is really what's the most powerful feature. You can write a task down anywhere on a sheet of paper if you wanted to, right? But let's say that I wanted to create a new email and have a task attached to it. So I click on new email here. Right, this is my old email. Used to be with Pacific Bay Mortgage. Got old picture. All right, so I type out my little email here, right? And then under follow-up, I can select when I want to be reminded. When do I want this to pop back up into my tasks? So for example, if I'm sending an intro email to a new borrower who I just spoke with, they're excited, I want to send this email, but I don't want to forget about them. I want to follow up. So I'll create a reminder for tomorrow. So tomorrow is an option. Next week, you could put a date in there. Usually I just put an actual date, right? And then I click OK. And then when I send the email, what's going to happen is it's going to pop up, right? This is organized by today, tomorrow. Well, those are all my tasks for tomorrow. And these are all my tasks that fall after that. Okay. And the red means that they're actually carryovers from the day before. I didn't get to them. Okay. So red is not good. Red means that those are my priorities. So if I put that email to be reminded of me tomorrow, it would pop up in this section here. And in the next morning when I get up, the first thing I do is I go through my tasks and I relabel all of them. So if I see that they haven't responded, you could send an email at 6 a.m. So a lot of my follow-up emails go out before 7 a.m. And then my phone calls, of course, will happen a little bit later. So that's how I organize my Outlook. I think it's pretty powerful. I think that is so. This, in combination with my CRM and the tasks that show up there, that is how I'm tracking all my follow-ups and making sure that I'm not losing anybody. It's happened maybe 4 times in my career where I have lost a deal. Not only lost it, but lost a lead. Like a realtor sends me a lead, and for whatever reason, like if I see a lead come in, I won't read the text because I don't want to forget. And if I do read it, I'll send myself an email, or if I'm not at my computer, or type in a task to make sure I reach out to that person. Okay, but it's happened less than a handful of times where a realtor sent me a lead, and then 3 weeks later they're like, "Hey, man, I never heard about what happened with this lead. What's going on?" That to me is ultimate failure, because if you're missing leads and you're not following up and you're not involving your business partner on your follow-up so they can see what's happening behind the scenes, they ain't going to send you any more leads. Okay, that happens once or twice and they're done. So, and a lot of the times it's a new realtor. They're one and done in you. So that's how I organize my Outlook to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. Whoa. All right. So talking again about organization, I put together a separate video on Dropbox organization. So you get the application back. They send you a bunch of docs. None of them are labeled. None of them are separated. So it's very important that you stay organized as a loan officer with your documents, that you have a standardized labeling system so that you can easily at a glance verify what docs you're missing. You don't have to open up every single one to figure it out. That is the enemy of efficiency. So I have my Dropbox down here organized and categorized my clients in terms of funded, in process, meaning they're in contract. You can say in contract, pre-approved, pre-qualified, credit challenged, fell through for the ones that just didn't work out. And I'm not going to go consider those folks again. I'll put them in my fell through. And then within the Dropbox, right? I've got different labeling conventions, right? I usually put, and again, separate video, take a look at it, but I go over my naming conventions to make sure it's all standardized. Really makes your processor's life easier. It makes your team members easier. It makes your life easier when you use the same naming convention for all your borrowers. Okay. So, and then, of course, let's say once, and if you're using a processor for full service processing, you want them to, actually do the pre-approval part and get you pricing. Then this would be the part where I've got my app. I just put all my docs in Dropbox, or maybe I am emailing them over to the processor. You're also going to want to send over the LO checklist so that they know the story behind the borrower. Okay. If you're not, then you're doing your own thing. Obviously, when you're pre-approving someone, you got to run Loan Sifter. I have a separate video on how to do that so you can figure out the pricing and make sure you're quoting accurate stuff. Okay, sorry, my phone's going off like crazy right now. All right. So once you've had the borrower appointment, so we've sat down with the borrower or we've done it over the phone. I've got a lot of borrowers that just love doing it over the phone, right? I mean, you just email them the pre-approval packet, all of your slideshows and everything you're going to be going over with the borrower. You can email it to them like 5 minutes before the meeting, do a little Zoom meeting or whatever, or just go through it together, however you want to do that, right? But folks like it when it's convenient for them. They don't have to go anywhere. But once you've finished the pre-approval appointment, you guys have established what program they want, you went over the rate, they're ready to go, then you're going to send them the pre-approval letter. So this slide here has a sample pre-approval letter. It's got Elite Mortgage on there because that's still who I'm originating through. It's got their name. It's going to have the program type, all the information that they have set up for in terms of the loan. Okay, it's very important that you do not send a pre-approval letter until you've reviewed all documents. It is unprofessional to send a letter out if you've not reviewed assets, if you haven't even pulled credit. So please make sure that you have a complete package, a complete application. And if there's a question about whether or not they're going to be able to get the loan, reach out to your processor, reach out to your account executive at the bank you're thinking about sending it to. Make sure we're not going to have a problem. And if there is going to be an issue or you anticipate something like that, then submit it in as a TBD. That's a to be determined file. So you send it into underwriting and they haven't gotten a contract yet. You just want the underwriter to confirm your income calcs, or you just want the underwriter to confirm that you can use the income based on their work history, or whatever specific question you have. If the account executive can't answer it, ask about submitting it as a TBD. I've never lost a deal because I've met with the borrower. It's a really complicated situation. I'm like, you know what, guys, I really don't want to give you this letter. You're out there looking at houses and ultimately you can't get a loan. So what I'd like to do is I want to send it to a couple different banks who are strong when it comes to this kind of situation and make sure that they can do it. So if you could give me 3 or 4 days to send it in, give the underwriter a chance to review it. I just want to avoid any surprises during this process. I've never lost a deal by letting the borrower know, hey, I'm going to ask for some help here. I want to get a second opinion on this, right? I don't want you wasting your time spending money on appraisals and home inspections when ultimately you can't get the loan. So if there's a question, put the brakes on and send it into a lender and make sure we're good. And explain it to the realtor too, right? Your realtor's trust comes from the strength of your pre-approvals. And if you're pre-approving folks and they're out there and your realtor spending their weekend showing houses to someone that ultimately couldn't get the loan at all to begin with, gosh, that is a huge withdrawal in the realtor relationship, very difficult to recover from. Okay, so take your time, slow down. If you don't got a good feeling or you don't understand something, just let everybody know, hey, I'm going to need a couple days with this. I just want to make sure I send it over to some folks who ultimately are going to be making this decision. Okay. So that's the pre-approval letter. I've gone over the fee sheet, how to create a fee sheet in a separate email, but you're also going to want to be sending them a fee sheet. So ultimately, after the pre-approval is set, and by the way, just a couple of pointers on the fee sheets, right? I always send a fee sheet with the pre-approval letter. Always, always, always. It avoids miscommunication, right? You can refer back to a fee sheet that you sent months later after they go into contract. You do not know how many times this has helped save me, okay? Because people don't remember things the way they actually went down sometimes. They have what's called selective memory, right? So you could tell them till you're blue in the face that the rate was a 5%. And then 2 months later, 5% is high, by the way. You're like, okay, you got a 5.1. They're like, wait, what? 5.1? That's not what we talked about. I'm like, okay, hold on a second. Let's go back to this email I sent you. Okay, let's open this up together. You see that 5.1 percentage rate? I mean, it's really what we talked about 2 months ago. Oh, yeah, I thought you said 3, right? So I've found, especially with particular borrowers, put everything in writing. Big milestones, numbers. Don't ever go off of a conversation, because then it becomes a he said, she said. This is one thing that I'm constantly drilling on my processor right now when we first started working together, and she's changed a lot since then. Never just have a heated conversation with someone and then be like, well, they said they're going to do it. No. I need it in writing, because when you document this stuff, right, you can go back and refer to it to avoid miscommunication. Okay, so very, very important. This happened to me last month. I had someone go into contract. They're like, dang, this rate's a little high. I'm like, okay, well, hold on. Let's go back and see the pre-approval letter I sent you with the fee sheet and see what the rate was on there. Oh, it looks like the rate is actually lower than what I sent originally. And they're like, I guess you're right, right? Exactly, right? I'm very transparent, right? And if you're remembering things wrong, I need to be able to prove that. Or guess what? It's my problem now. Now they don't trust me, okay? The fee sheet also explains all the relevant numbers. It goes over the monthly payment, the total cash they need at the end of the day. I color coordinate it so they can see where all the closing costs are coming from. It is a beautiful document and a very powerful tool when you're pre-approving someone. The pre-approval letter doesn't have any of this stuff on it. Okay, the pre-approval letter is ripe for misinterpretation, right? All it has is I don't even think it has a rate on there. It just has a purchase price, loan type, very basic stuff. Okay, so you got to have a fee sheet to avoid miscommunication. It will save you, and it'll help you feel like you're being more honest and a good communicator with your folks. Okay. Also, please help them understand this is an estimate. We are not locking in an interest rate until you get an offer accepted and it comes time to lock. It's very important you understand that. Okay. The rate is going to fluctuate, and I'm going to call you every Thursday to make sure you understand what's going on with the market and what's happening with rates. All right. So when you get ready to send them out the pre-approval letter, okay, I always send out not just the pre-approval letter, but a fee sheet and the pre-approval packet. So this slide kind of shows everything I'm sending them, right? So you send the pre-approval letter as an attachment, you send the fee sheet as an attachment, and then you send the pre-approval packet, which is a summation of what you went over during the pre-approval appointment. It's got the step-by-step guide of the home buying process, got your 10 pre-approval commandments, got your different buckets of closing costs. They understand all that. Send out the 10 pre-approval commandments, because guess what? When that borrower goes and gets a gift from somewhere they weren't supposed to, you can refer back when they're like, well, I didn't know. No one told me. I'm like, did you read the 10 pre-approval commandments? Do you remember we went over that during the pre-approval appointment? Here, let's go back to the email where I sent it to you. Okay. You got to make sure you understand that when people are making mistakes, that they understand lovingly who actually made the mistake. It's going to save your reputation. Now, it's done with the right energy, it can be a great experience. Done condescendingly, very different experience and takeaway from everybody, even if you're right. All right, so after you send out the pre-approval letter, the fee sheet, and the packet, right? And that's also an email template, by the way, or an email signature. It's pre-selected. After that, you've sent the letter. Now they're just out there looking. They could be looking for houses for days, weeks. I got borrowers that have been looking for a house for over a year. Okay, so during that time that they're out there looking, you are touching them every week via a phone call. Let's call them, you could be a Thursday, it could be a Wednesday, it could be a Friday, right? But it's a market update. You got to touch your borrowers or you're going to lose them, right? They're going out to open houses, and open houses, a lot of them are going to have lenders just waiting to swoop in and try and take the business. And some of them are incredibly aggressive. If they're looking at new builds, you will probably lose them if you're not staying in front of that. Okay, so check in, ask them how the house search is coming along, right? Are they finding stuff in their price range? They're just not getting offer accepted. Are you still out there looking? Are you taking a break? Well, in the meantime, here's what's going on with interest rates. They've gone up, they've gone down, whatever. Half the time, I mean, gosh, when I make my Thursday update calls and I'm calling 50 people, right? One or two might actually ask me what the actual rate is. Everyone else is just like, okay, cool, man. Hey, I appreciate you checking in. Thanks. Right? So these little touches you're doing show that you care. It keeps you in front of everybody else. Never assume that they're not being chased by other lenders. Never assume, because once you pull their credit, other lenders are calling them too. There are lending outfits that pay the bureaus for their credit pulls. And if it's a mortgage inquiry, they're going to start getting bombarded with phone calls, with emails. So stay in front. Now, once they get an offer accepted, so they're out there looking for 3 months and, hey, we got an offer accepted. Yay. This is a big milestone. Okay. You need two things from the realtor. Okay. Number one, you need the fully executed purchase contract. That's going to tell you the address, the terms of the deal, everything you need to know. You also need the escrow officer's contact info. Those are the two things you need to get going as the lender. So make sure your realtor understands this. If they call you and they're like, "Hey, we're so excited, we gotta do. By the way, it's a 21 day, so we gotta move fast." I always throw that back. That's great, awesome. That means I need the purchase contract and the escrow officer's contact ASAP because I gotta get going, and I can't start until you send me those two things. So now we are in contract. So your client has gone from pre-approved to in process. They are progressing up this ladder that ultimately takes them to funded. Now, once they're in contract, there's a lot of stuff to go over. Okay, so let's see. So once you get the contract, right, now it's time to select a lender. So based on the terms of the contract, if it's a 21-day close, you're going to want to go with the fast lender. If it's a 30-day close, you could probably afford to go with a lender that might not be quite as quick. All right. So keep in mind that this comes the time to start thinking about a lender. You want to start updating point, and you want to start thinking about locking with that lender. Okay, so I'm going to be going over some important milestones that you're going to be tracking as a loan officer. But I have a calendar for every single one of my deals, right? So you guys can see this here. So this is my daily tracker, which we'll go over in a minute, which is all of my current in contract files. So in my morning processing meeting, I print out a new one of these every day. This is April 15th, right? And it's got all my different deals. And so I'm circling the files that I need to contact that day, and I write down what I got to do. And behind that, if I go through all my pages here, right, you start to get into my different calendars. So this is the Ramsey file calendar. This is the Lee file calendar, the Nicholson file calendar, the Lamb, right? Just keep going down. These are all the different. So I have a calendar for every single one of my files. Every morning I'm busting this thing out. Me and my processor are sitting down and saying, okay, what's to come? We're 3 days in. This hasn't happened yet. We got to make sure we order this. This is called being a project manager. And when you keep a calendar like this little sample over here, which you go online and look at PDF blank calendar and you'll come up with something. Right? Just print one out. It's just a 1 month and it's got a little box for every day. And this is where I'm tracking a couple of things, right? So when you first get the contract and you first print out your calendar, you're going to want to mark when open escrow was. So when we opened escrow, you want to mark when the close of escrow was or is estimated to be. And then you want to put down your contingency deadlines. So there are contingencies that protect the borrower's earnest money deposit. There's an appraisal contingency and there's a loan contingency. Now, these are two big milestones in the file. When we have to remove those contingencies, that means the borrower no longer can get their earnest money deposit back potentially. So we need to know when we got to remove those contingencies. So I'm prepping to make sure we're prepared to do so when the time comes. So a good TC will send you the contingency removal dates. If you don't get sent that information, ask your realtor, hey, can you just tell me when the appraisal contingency? I'm not seeing that anywhere. I just want to make sure I'm tracking things on my side. Now, with your open escrow, with your close of escrow and your contingency dates, now you have a structured file. Now you have a timeline you got to work within to get this thing closed. And it's a timeline you're going to look at every single day. And you're going to be able to count how many days we have left. And oh, crap, I still got to do this. And we're running behind. And the second you find out we're running behind, you're calling the listing agent, the buyer's agent, the buyer. Hey, here's what's going on. We are about 24 hours behind on this file. Here's why. This would really help me if you did this or whatever. I'll be happy to call the seller and explain what's going on. Okay. The other great thing about keeping a calendar is you can track why there was a delay to begin with. Everyone always blames the loan officer. But a lot of times it's the realtor's fault. Dude, it took you 4 days to get me an addendum I was asking for. You didn't send me this this seller credit until the day we got docs out. And so you got to give me 24 hours to have the lender receive it, process it, and get the numbers right. Okay, so by tracking what's actually happening behind the scenes, you get rid of this assumption that it's somehow just always our fault. Okay, sometimes it's a borrower. When you track, hey, I asked for docs this day. It took them a week to get me this doc. And I called them, I texted them. They're just not being very responsive. Guess what? Now it's not your fault, right? Now the realtor's like, oh man. And a lot of times they're like, you should have told me sooner, right? So day 2 or 3, if you're just telling them I got a doc, involve the realtor, right? Show the realtor that you care about meeting your deadlines by involving them when you need to. Okay, so contingencies, open escrow, close of escrow, and then tracking important milestones and delays is very, very important. All of that goes on these little calendars I do. And then when a file funds, I used to save them, but now I just trash it. It's like a little celebratory. It funded, and I crumple it up and throw it in the garbage, and I'm that much lighter in my thick pipe, right? That I'm always trying to push through. All right. And the other thing I showed you on my next slide is just my daily tracker, right? So this is currently 21 in contract. These are all locked loans. Okay. So again, I print out another one every day. I'm deleting out who funded. I'm adding new people to win the contract. But this is like whenever someone goes into contract, I first put them here because I know if they're here, I'm not going to forget them because I'm looking at it every single day. I also track the files that I'm waiting for payment on. You know, sometimes it takes, there's the delay from the escrow company or the title company to get us our check, but I don't want to forget that kind of stuff. I'm tracking this carefully. There's one time where I was due a $7,000 check. It took like 2 weeks because the title company sent it to the wrong place or something, right? But if I had not been tracking that, guess what? Nobody else is. They really aren't. It's up to you. This is your business. You need to track it. And I'm patiently just checking in. Hey, just still waiting on this payment. Every morning I'm talking to my processor. Hey, I'm still waiting on these 2 checks, right? And they always come. I'm not going to get paid, but I'm patient and I'll wait a week or two if something goes wrong. I also track VOEs that are outstanding, right? Sometimes I'm requesting a verification of employment during pre-approval. I want to make sure we're checking in and talking about that because this is my morning meeting where I'm sitting down, I'm making sure that I know what's going on with my files. I also have a TBD section here for the files that I'm sending to lenders that I need some input on before I give them their pre-approval. So I'm tracking them here. And then my thank you cards, right? When someone funds, I give them a thank you card, a little gift card. Here's a little $25 Amazon thing or something just to say thank you. And that's where I'm asking for a review too. Okay, so you don't have to structure it just like this, but I found this incredibly beneficial. I used to hand write this every day, but when your pipe gets to 15, 20, 30, it's very tedious to draw it out or write it out every day. So I stopped doing that. All right, so some important milestones to track. I'm going to go through each of these milestones in detail. Whoops. But the first one is the date that you got the contract. I wonder if I can extend that out now. And got the fees from the title company. So these are very important, right? So if it took the realtor 3 days to get me the contract and it's a 21-day close of escrow, that ain't something I'm going to forget. I got to write that down so that when day 20 comes of 21 and the realtor's like, oh my gosh, Doug, why didn't you get those docs out yesterday? I'm like, please keep in mind that I didn't get the contract for 3 days, and that did put us behind schedule. And we've been really trying to make up for lost time ever since then, but that did put us at somewhat of a disadvantage. So next go around, let's make sure I get the contract on day one. It's going to make my job a lot easier. Now, if I forgot that because I didn't track it on my little calendar here and the realtor starts laying into me because we're not getting docs out the day we wanted to, guess what? I'm just going to eat it. Dang it. I'm sorry. I'm always screwing up. What's wrong? Right. So track it. Let's have a heightened level of awareness of what's actually going on behind the scenes, because you will forget when you got 30 in contract, what's the story behind each and every single one. Also, track how long it takes the title company to get you fees. So right away, when we get the escrow officer's contact info, we're reaching out to the title company. We're like, hey, super looking forward to working with you. This is something processing does. Can you give me a list of your actual fees? Because that fee sheet that I send out, that's an estimate, right? Points just got like some preloaded, fees based on a loan size that are not going to match exactly what the title company's actual fees are. So we got to get those before we disclose a lot of times, unless the lender pads or whatever. So ultimately, I like to track that. If it takes the title company 3 days to get me fees, guess what? I'm going to be referencing the title company when we're not hitting our deadlines. Hey, we had some challenges at the beginning. I told you about this in our first Tuesday update, but it did take the title company a couple days to get us what we were asking for. I know the industry is impacted. People are busy, but we've been making up for lost time ever since then, right? Boom. We got a little bit of an explanation, a little why into what's going on. You know what they're going to take away? Man, Doug is trying his hardest, and odds were stacked against him, right? Versus, dude's just dropping the ball. I'm tired of it. Okay. Next milestone, we're just going to go through them here. And these are the kind of stuff you want to track on that calendar we talked about. Auth form. So right away when we go into contract, I have an email signature that is for a new borrower in contract. If you go to my email signature video, it's there. Boom. Congratulations for going to contract. Super excited to work with you. Here's the people you're going to be working with. By the way, can you please sign and return these 2 forms? One's to pay for the appraisal. One's to pay to authorize us to reach out to your employer and get what we need on your behalf. Boom. Send it out. Write it down. And we can't order the appraisal till we get this auth form on file. And if we do need a VOE or verification of employment, we can't get it till we have that borrower's auth. So track it. Make sure you keep track. And call. I usually send the intro email And I always call the borrower when we go into contract. Congratulations, I'm super excited for you. Hey, I just sent you an email. I need a couple forms printed, signed, and returned. Always have that initial phone call with your borrower on day one to go over the first steps and stages. I usually explain the auth forms we're going to need. I explain that we're waiting on the fees from the title company. And then once that happens, we're going to select a lender and get you disclosures. And that's around the time we're going to start locking a rate. So that's usually what I explain on my initial phone call with the borrower. Once we get those fees back, right, or from the title company, and we select a lender and either lock or decide to float, depending on the market and the borrower, then you send the package to the lender, and they're going to work on getting the disclosures out to the borrower. Now, the initial disclosures is an initial snapshot of how the loan's looking so far. It is not finalized numbers. One of my email signatures explains this because you're going to send an email and say, hey, the disclosures just went out directly from the lender. Fill in the lender name. Please note, these disclosures are padded. The reason they're padded is because a lender cannot legally charge you more than they disclose on certain fees. And so they're going to pad it. I mean, gosh, maybe that title company's more than they were told at the beginning. Maybe they got to collect more months of taxes, or maybe that seller credit that they disclosed isn't something that ends up happening at the end of the day. Guess what? If that changes, the lender's got to eat it. And when TRID first started and all these guidelines changed, lenders were eating it an awful lot. So they started to pad. So I always tell people, and I send them a revised fee sheet. I guess I meant that. So that those fee sheets that we've been sending out, as soon as I get those fees from the title company, I send them a real fee sheet with the actual numbers. And I'll send that real fee sheet in that same email where I'm asking them to sign the lender's disclosure. So they have something to reference. Hey, those disclosures, those closing costs are like $6,000 too high. This lender's crazy. They're padding everything. But here's a fee sheet with the real numbers, okay? That this is going to be a little more accurate. I don't have all the same red tape I got to walk through to make sure that you got some accurate figures here. So I usually send a fee sheet so they have some kind of reference point of what's real. Okay, they have to sign the electronic disclosures before we can get it into underwriting and before we can order an appraisal. So there's a lot of pressure once those goes out to get those things signed. So it's very important you contact your buyer. Don't be like, what, I sent it to you 4 days ago. You didn't see it. Half the time it goes into their spam. So make sure you call them. They know it's there. They confirm they got it. You'll usually get a notification when they e-sign it. Okay. This is also the time we talk about a rate if we haven't already. We're floating it, or let's lock it. If we haven't floated it yet, or we haven't locked it yet, it's important to mention that the disclosures have a 3.2. That is not your rate. We've decided to float based on our conversation yesterday. So that's going to change, and then the disclosures will say that. Okay. Once they're signed, boom, it goes into underwriting. Boom, it goes into the appraisal is ordered. I got to have that auth form to get that appraisal ordered, but those two things happen. And then we just kind of sit back and we wait. We wait to get that initial underwriter approval back, and we wait to get that appraisal in. Okay, so now this is our waiting period. There's a lot to do, getting borrowers auth forms and disclosures out, lock and rate. But then once we do that, we just kind of wait. That's what I tell the borrowers. There's a lot to do the first 2 or 3 days, and then it's just a waiting game. Okay. And then boom, we get our underwriter approval. This is our initial underwriter approval. So the initial underwriter approval means, hey, I, the underwriter, the person that's actually going to approve this loan, not you, the loan officer, you are not approving loans. I've looked at it. Here's what I need. Here's what I'm unclear on. Here's what I'm going to need from the buyer. Now, these underwriter approvals are going to have conditions. Some of these conditions are marked PTD, and some of these conditions are marked PTF. PTD stands for prior to docs. That means that I got to get these conditions in before I'm going to generate loan docs and have the borrower sign. So that's a pretty important condition. We got to get that quickly. PTF means, sure, I'll get the docs out, but I'm not going to fund it until I get that condition. So that's a prior to fund versus a prior to docs. The processor will go through and they'll usually clean the underwriter approval up for you and just send you the borrower related, loan officer related items. A clean approval is where you only get a couple of conditions. A messy approval is where you get like 10, 15 conditions. It's overwhelming. Everybody's stressed out. It's happened to me before. Okay. So the processor will scrub it. They'll send you the stuff that's applicable, right? And then once you send that that email to the borrower, you're going to say, hey, congratulations, we got underwriter approval. Yay. Hey, here's a couple things the underwriter is asking for to get us to final approval. Please send within the next 24 to 48 hours. I send the email and then I call them right afterwards. Hey, I just sent you an email. I want to talk about these items they're asking for. Make sure you got them, kind of get a feel for the timeline. If they say, oh man, it's going to take me 2 weeks to get that W-2, Doug, I can't find it, then you've got to follow that up with, well, I totally understand. Just know that I won't be able to close the loan on time. I cannot guarantee an on-time close if it's going to take that long to get this kind of a document. Okay, so make sure you're communicating timelines. Make sure you're communicating a sense of urgency, but that's realistic. It stresses out your buyers when you're like, I want this tomorrow. You're like, dude, I gotta go into the county courthouse. I got to get this documentation for my divorce stuff. That's not going to happen tomorrow. So be realistic, but be honest about how this is going to impact the timeline so they're not surprised when it takes them a week and a half. And all of a sudden, everyone's pissed off because we're not closing on time, and the buyer will always try and put that back on you. Well, my loan officer never said it was a big deal. I thought I had a week. Okay, you never want that happening. Okay, put a timer on it is my last point. Make sure they understand the urgency. So you get your underwriter approval. Next big thing we're waiting on is the appraisal report. Yay, the appraisal came in. Okay, so when the appraisal comes in, usually in the first 2 or 5 pages, there's going to be one page on that thing that's very important. It's the one page that I go to. I don't care about the rest of the report. I just want to see this one page. It's towards the bottom. It's going to look like this. Okay? And it's going to have the value of the house right here, $385. Okay? So that's their opinion of value and the date that they gave it. Very important. You want to make sure that value matches what they're buying the house for, or that it's more. If it's less than what they're buying the house for, we got issues. And I got some email signature blocks there to help you, or email signatures, right? If it's below, then we got to renegotiate. We got to lower the price, or they got to pay the cash difference between the two, which not a lot of people do. Also, so you want to make sure the value's there. And then number 2, you want to make sure that the appraisal came in as is. There's 2 options for an appraisal, as is or subject to. As is means that the value is as the house stands currently. There's nothing that needs to happen for this home to get the loan. But if it says subject to instead, that means that there's some things that need to happen before this house can get the loan. And if it says subject to, you got to read and figure out what, because a lot of times they'll put right afterwards right here, what is, hey, there were no smoke detectors on level 2. I need those installed, or the water heater wasn't double strapped, or there was peeling paint. Sometimes if there's a lot of stuff, they're not going to list it here. They'll say see addendum 2, or sometimes they're not very clear about it. And you got to go searching through the report to figure out what conditions they're talking about. Most appraisers will take pictures of the areas that were an issue. So you can always go through towards the back and look at the pictures so they're very clear about what needs to happen. So you got to get clear about what needs to happen. You got to convey that to the realtor. Now, the buyer's agent, not the listing agent. You never send a report to a listing agent without the buyer's agent and the borrower's permission. Okay, it is not the listing agent's right to receive a copy of an appraisal. Guess who paid for it? The borrower did. Okay, so if the appraisal came in nice and high, we don't want that going to the listing agent because that's going to kill our buyer's ability to negotiate. So they're going to be like, dang, dude, the house appraised at $400, you're buying it for $350. You're getting a crazy screaming deal. I'm not fixing those gutters. You deal with it. Right? Otherwise, I'm going to pull out and sell it to someone else for $400 because now I know my house is worth $400, not $350. Never send an appraisal report to a listing agent, ever. It's happened one time. Actually, I had a situation where I think my processor accidentally sent it to the listing agent when my buyer's agent specifically asked him not to. It was bad. It was bad. Happened. I can't remember. It was a while back. So I always send the appraisal report to the borrower, and I always include the buyer's agent. I'll CC them because the buyer's agent needs to track this stuff. They need to know when they can remove the appraisal contingency and if the value came in. If not, they're going to be calling you and asking you anyway. So I usually send it to the buyer, and then I include the buyer's agent with a little explanation of what it all means. It's a big milestone. Track it. And if it does come back subject to, and you got to have some repair work, make sure you're tracking that on your calendar. The appraisal reinspection is called a 1004D. So I always put 1004D ? And I put an arrow. So I don't forget that we need the 1004D. We got to order that. I got to follow up with the agents. They got to tell me when the house is ready. I'm going to send my dude back out or my gal back out to do that reinspection. Once I get the appraisal report in, once I get all my conditions from my buyer that they're needing, now I submit the whole thing back into underwriting for final approval. Mark that on your calendar when it was submitted because then you can track your timelines. Okay. So this is where I've got all my PTD conditions, right? I don't got to submit a PTF condition necessarily because PTF means prior to fund. I don't need it just yet. I'm just trying to get docs out. Okay. So we submit for final approval. That's a big milestone. Around the same time we submit for final approval, most lenders will allow you to request what's called the closing disclosure, or the acronym is CD. Closing disclosure is a big milestone on a file, right? Closing disclosure is very similar to the initial disclosure in that it's an e-signature that goes out to the buyer. They got to log in and e-sign it. There's no printing or anything that's involved. But so it's the same disclosure platform as before. It's much shorter than the initial disclosure. Initial disclosures are like 100 pages. It's very overwhelming for the buyer. Prep them for that. The initial disclosures are just, there's like 50 pages, 50 places to sign. It can be kind of a headache to work through. Nice thing is you can fast forward to the next signature if you want. But the closing disclosure is only like 5 or 6 pages, and it's got a finalized version of the numbers. Now, some lenders will balance with title company prior to sending out the CD. If that happens, then the numbers are going to be finalized. The amount that they need to bring to the table, the monthly payment, everything's going to be pretty finalized. So I usually give the buyer a heads up. These numbers should be more accurate than the initial disclosures were. They're going to be removing some of the padding, especially if they've already balanced with the title company, but some don't. If they don't tell them that, because if the number is still crazy high, it's going to be a concern to the buyer. Okay, so this is the last disclosure that's going to go out from the lender that needs to be e-signatures. Now, so why this is such an important milestone, why we push to get the closing disclosure out as soon as possible, is because once they e-sign it, it's going to trigger a 3-day waiting period that's required before we can get the loan docs to the title company. Okay, so once that goes out, it's important you talk to your buyer and you say, hey, I need you to sign this before midnight tonight, because once you do, it's going to trigger a 3-day wait. And so that during that 3 days, we're getting our final approval from the lender, and we're going to try and start working on docs to get over to the title company for you to sign. So during those 3 days, right? Oh, and also when the CD goes out, you're going to want to start talking to chatting with the buyer about, hey, how are you going to be getting the money that you need to title, right? Are you going to be bringing a cashier's check? Are you going to be wiring it over? Have that conversation with your buyer. Make sure that you verify that the money's coming from the account that you have on file. It's happened a few times where they send me bank statements for Chase. I submitted an underwriting. Underwriters approve the account. And then last minute, the money's coming from Golden One. And the wire goes to the title company, and the lender's like, wait, what the heck? I don't even have this bank statement on record. I got to vet it. I got to QC it. We got to make sure that none of this, there's some money laundering going on. So just have the conversation with the buyer. It's not very common that they send money from a statement you don't have on file, but it's always good to have that conversation, guys. Just saying. So while we're waiting for our 3 days to run out after they sign this electronic closing disclosure, we should be getting clear to close. Clear to close means that all prior to doc or PTD conditions have been cleared by the underwriter. So now the file is ready to prepare for the final balance with the title company. Okay, so final balance means that the lender starts to open up communication with the title company, right? Where usually the lender will say, "Hey, title company, boom, here's my CD, here's all my stuff. Tell me if all your fees are still correct. Tell me if I'm missing anything. We got to make sure we're in agreement as to how much the buyer needs to come to the table with," right? This is where they're communicating with the title company if there's an outstanding lien, or maybe there's a seller credit that the lender's missing. Maybe the taxes are off because the title company's checking on the tax bills, as is the lender, but they're basically coming together to make sure the two of them are on the same page. They have to be on the same page before the loan docs are sent over. There are a few lenders out there that just send the CD out and they balance later. It's messy if you do that, because then the buyer signs loan docs that aren't correct, and we got to do these revisions. So that's why most lenders require a balance, so that we only sign one set of loan docs. Okay, we make sure that the title company is not going to take issue with anything we have. So once they do their balance, which usually happens in a day, it could take a couple hours, just depends on how busy the lender is and the title company. But once you see that the loan docs have been sent to the title company for them to print out and have the buyer sign, you're going to want to ask the escrow officer for a settlement statement, an estimated settlement statement. An estimated settlement statement is a final breakdown of all of the final charges from the lender, what the seller's given, the credits, and at the end of the day, how much the buyer needs to come to the table with. That is the number that is to the penny accurate. So it's important that you understand that number, okay? A bad loan officer just has the lender send the docs to the title company and then just waits for the buyer to finish signature, and then hopefully everything works out. No, you want to get ahead of that, right? Because if If the money they have to come to the table with is $3,000 higher than we're all thinking, you need to know that before they show up to the closing table. And you got to be able to explain, you got to get ahead of news like that. Hey, the closing costs are actually a little higher than we thought. Apparently, there's this tax lien they found on you guys, and we got to pay that off at closing. You want to be the one to explain that to the buyers. You don't want somebody else to. Okay, so always be double checking your stuff before your buyer shows up to sign. So you send that settlement statement to the buyer, let them know that the title company will be contacting them to sign. Please make sure you sign as soon as possible. Explain to them it takes about 45 minutes to an hour. It's better if you go into the title company. It's faster because the signed docs are already there, and the title company can send them into the lender versus a notary coming out to some place, and the notary's got to drop the doc package in the mail. Takes another 24 hours to get to the title. Then the title sends it to the lender. We end up losing a day or two if they don't do it at the title company. On a refi, it's very uncommon for a buyer to go into a title company. We're not really in as much a big a hurry on refi, so usually the notary will just go straight out to their house. Okay, so we schedule a signing, right? You can, when you're small and you don't have a lot of deals closing, go to signing. Be there with your buyers. My first year, I went to a lot of signings, right? You just kind of sit there. If they have any questions, you answer their questions. I was always crazy nervous because there's like 100 pages. I'm like, man, what if they ask me a question? I don't know. So, review the docs ahead of time, right? But make sure you're available via phone. It's very, very important, right? I always get stressed when there's a 6:00 p.m. signing and I get a call from the buyers at 6:10. So I'm like, oh crap, there's a problem. There's only one reason why a buyer's calling me during signing. It's because something's not making sense. So I remember when it was really busy, like a refi boom, I had people signing at 8, 9 at night, and I just stayed up and was watching TV or whatever, just waiting for that phone call. So I was ready, because if your buyers need you during signing, you got to make yourself available. Sometimes, if depending on the buyer, it's a stupid question, something silly. I don't want to say stupid, that's condescending, but some silly question like, hey, just want to confirm, notary's not sure, just want to, okay, yeah, you're good. Yeah, you're good. Go ahead and sign it, right? But if you're not available and it's a stubborn buyer, sometimes they won't sign and they'll wait, and then everything just gets thrown off. Okay. Now, the following day after signing, always call your buyers to see how it went. If you never heard from them during signing, never assume it went well. Okay. So there's always a follow-up call after signing. You're just calling, hey, how'd it go? What'd you think of the notary? The numbers all make sense. It all matched what we talked about. Awesome. Did you get your money over to the title company? If not, make sure you do that. We got to get this over before we can fund. But always, always, always call your buyer the day after funding to make sure everything went cool. All right. And then once they sign the docs, the title company is going to send the package over to the lender. Lender's going to review everything, and they're going to give us what's called a set of funding conditions. Funding conditions are all of the prior to funding stuff, right? So very seldom is there a buyer condition in there or something that concerns us, the loan officer. Most of the time, it's lender's got to do, or title company and lender have their back and forth they got to do. Once they get all the funding conditions in, title company or a lender requests the wire, they fund it. Okay. So when a lender funds, what that means is they request a wire that then comes from a warehouse line, goes to the Federal Reserve, and it arrives at the title company. Usually takes an hour or two. Once it arrives at the title company, then the title company requests that it be recorded on the county records. Once it gets recorded, we're good. Everything's fine. And a lot of times, if a lender can fund before 11 or noon, the title company should be able to fund that same day. But if they request the wire pretty late in the afternoon, it's not going to happen that day. Usually they close the following day. So that's pretty much the process in a nutshell, right? At the end, this is where I'm weakest. Don't forget to ask for a review. Towards the end there, after they sign, they're happy, everything's good. Be like, hey man, I'd really appreciate if you drop me a review, send them a little email about how to do it on Facebook or whatever. This is where I am weakest as a loan officer, is not asking for reviews. But please make this a part of your process. All right, guys, this is a long video. I went over a lot of milestones. Take notes, write them down, especially your first 10 or 15 deals. Print out all of the milestones you're supposed to be tracking, and then just make sure you're checking off the boxes so that you're not forgetting everything. You are the project manager of your files. It is no one else's responsibility to track this but you. This is your business. Do not rely on your processor to do it for you. Do not rely on the lender to do it for you. Nobody else cares as much as you about seeing that this thing closes, because no one's getting paid as much as you on the file. Okay, so take responsibility for the deal being a great experience for the buyer or not. Okay. And if something goes wrong, that's an awesome opportunity to have a service recovery. And we'll talk about that in videos to come. Thanks, guys. Good luck out there. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.